Good afternoon. Got the graveyard shift. Last one before we rush to the pub. Right, my name's Ben Kisso. I'm head up a company called The Streaming Company, which may not surprise you. We get involved in streaming and mobiles and things like that. So let's give you a little idea of what we're going to cover today. Going to have a look at some observations. I'm not a techie, so don't expect anything heavily techie. That's what I employ people for. But a general overview of how some of this business of throwing video around, trying to track people that are on the run with their mobiles is certainly one that keeps us awake at nights, which is nice. And it certainly is a little bit more of a curved ball than possibly pitching to people in their corporate firewalls. Anyway, what we're going to look at is a little bit of the challenges delivering it to a mobile or a tablet. We'll quick look at the platform side of it. It's quite interesting to see what their challenges are. Creating the right formats for the increasing array of devices that are out there. Optimization, quality optimization is clearly what we're all after. We want everything to look absolutely hunky-dory and that lovely word HD. Latency is something we tend to specialize a lot in, and it's of no relevance to some people, but it happens to be a very large part of our business, so I'll touch a little bit on that. Formats, delivery methods, and then we're going to have a look at a couple of case studies and then a little summary at the end. So, let's start with who am I and what do I do? We effectively are an independent streaming company. We have our own CDN. We live in an expensive data center in London. We use cloud, we use other CDNs, and we use our own capacity as well. And the sort of skill base, being a typical streaming company, encapsulate pretty much the whole IP sphere, be it encoding, streaming, understanding of telcos, carriers, the internet, BGPs, and all this lovely game, and networks generally, as we often find ourselves drilling through people's firewalls. So it's quite an interesting environment to be in. It's certainly not without its challenges, but we love it, and some of us are masochistic enough to like focusing on live events rather than having the backup of an as live. One of the things that possibly qualifies me a little bit, I've been stuck in a room with some fascinating guys with all the carriers since the beginning of a thing called the Mobile Video Alliance, which has now just gained formalization, and it very much addresses what we're talking about today, which is sticking video through to people's tablets and mobiles. So let's have a look at some stats. I think if we look at the marketplace, make no excuses for using Mr. Cisco's research. Key point here is 2013, we're just playing with it. And if anybody believes and watches how many tablets and phablets and smartphones are going out the door, clearly it's a very big growing market. And this lovely bit, 2018 here, dark blue, just happens to be video, 70% of it. So you'd be pretty mad not to realize that video is possibly one of the biggest challenges and certainly the biggest growth area going forward. Whether these results will pan out to 2018, I don't hold anybody responsible for, but the point is we're on a trend that we can't go back from. Interestingly, we're obviously all talking about 4G and 3G, and we used to talk about 2G. Globally, we're not getting rid of 3G, much to possibly the idea that we get fantastic 4G, and I'm interested from the last conversation that a complete reliance on 4G, our experience is it doesn't always work, funnily enough, and therefore you need to be able to switch between any number of different delivery methods. And I think it's fair to say that we will always, particularly when you're on the run, switch between masts that are 4G and 3G, and that's the nature of the game. You've got to kind of pick up whatever connectivity you've got at the time. So 4G is going to grow, it's fantastic, we love it, but it isn't faultless, as we'll come on to go about. And certainly, talking to the boys and speaking to them, the EE boys that came out of the traps the earliest, they're going great guns on distributing the 4G network around the place, but let's not kid ourselves. It's all right if you're in London, in the Middle East, but if you're down in Cornwall or you're up in Scotland, apart from a few areas, you're not going to be using 4G. And it's all the alliances between Vodafone and O2 and everybody. It's great, and it'll take time. So, there's this sort of almost acceptance just because I happen to be in London and everybody's got a smartphone and we're all connected to 4G, that's life. It's not. The reality is you go in the sticks and you ain't going to get very good connectivity. And those are the real challenges that we face when we're on the run doing occasional venues rather than lovely static events in great connected hotels. Although it'd be interesting to know what the capacity is in this hotel. It's probably got a fairly low limit. Anyway, the other bit they pump out is what sort of connectivity. And in the days of good old 2G at 92 kilobits, we're now told that we might get up to 14 megabits per second. Again, depends on how many people are using that particular cell at the time. So excuse my skepticism, but on the basis that I have to brief my client as to the assurance that a live event will carry on going seamlessly without any faults, we tend to look at these figures with a little bit of skepticism. So that's not being rude, Mr. Cisco. So what this adds up to, a number of factors there, is that we're trying to avoid this whole principle of people having a bad experience. And let's face it, we've all seen it. It's not exactly unusual in the sense that how many people lose a phone call mid going in their train or on their journey. Of course, the handover between masts isn't seamless. Sometimes it fails, and all manner of obstacles are in our way. Constant connectivity is never really constant, particularly if people are coming in and out of a zone or you're moving between zones as well. And the one thing we really do need for video is a degree of constancy. We don't need to expect 4 million megabytes per second, but certainly it would be nice to know we had a certain amount, and therefore even if we're adaptive or if we fixed, we're using an uplink device, 3-4G bonded. Some of them are very good and are adaptive to a certain amount, but there's a limit to it, and therefore if you run out of a certain amount of bandwidth, you're going to get suffering. You're going to suffer delay, and a lot of people will go on to the latency idea of this, will then build in buffering to allow a degree of recovery. But we, again, masochistically tend to focus on the low latency live streaming bit, which means we run out of buffer. So we have very real challenges there. So let's have a look at some of the issues that affect the mobile streams. Certainly in terms of, we're looking at pushing to people with mobile phones in a corporate environment, which we do a lot in the B2B training market, for example. We've got, obviously, corporate firewall problems. A lot of people are connecting Wi-Fi through the corporate firewall, which will block any BYOD, any device. They don't want, there's a degree of paranoia about whose phone is connecting to the central network and what the security is. Again, this is in a corporate level, and some people couldn't give a damn, and isn't it fun connecting to people's free Wi-Fi from a corporate that don't have any security policies? But let's face it, a lot of them do, and we have to abide by that. And I don't pity the poor network guys who are in charge of security when all manner of devices with goodness knows what hacked angry birds appear to log on to their networks. But certainly the corporate environment is one where we have to say to our clients, have we effectively whitelisted? In our case, we're lucky that we don't use any syndicated platform. We can use our own. We can pin it down to our own AS or our own particular IP range, and therefore ask them if it's a regular delivery to a corporate to say, please treat us as a friend rather than a foe. That's a good way of, if you've got the time to be able to test with the audience that they can indeed allow it. Some of our content that we push out is for gaming and gambling environments, so therefore there will always be a network block on various things like that as well. So there's lots of challenges in terms of can we get the video through to a person's device in a corporate environment. Possibly more relevant to many people around here was what happens in the B2C environment. The B2C environment is a really fun game. It really is. The large events, we were down at Twickenham doing the pre-internationals for a certain carrier, and we couldn't use video over bonded 3-4G because they didn't have a capacity there. 82,000 people arrive in one spot, and surprise, surprise, not a lot of capacity left. So and with the sort of problems we get also can relate to SLA agreements. I mean, there aren't any great quas in terms of open mobile delivery at the moment, and certainly even in a corporate environment, we had a rather strange request from one of the divisions of the NHS to put video through to a certain event, and then realised that the contract they'd signed with the deliverable architects of their platform suggested that if they included video, they would be in breach of their SLA to the same client. So you get these wonderful sort of rather odd frictions between what people would like to do and the safeguards that are in place to make sure that video or core data is actually still pushed through. What is essential data? For the NHS, it might be the patient records have to fly backwards and forwards, and video must therefore suffer. So you can't naturally brag and say we will have priority. It's a sort of corporate, individual, case-by-case basis. And there's certainly, in terms of some of the biggest restrictions, one of the ones that I think people are yet to really see is this, I want 4G, I've paid for my 4G rate, but I'm only capped to a certain amount. And you may not know, if you've got your phone in your pocket, if you're switching between 3 and 4G as you go along, and therefore you'll have no idea what your bill will be if you've overrun your tariff. So there's a very real concern from consumers that you could be clocking up very large data bombs at the end of the day. So we have to be slightly careful. BlackBerry used to, on BlackBerry 7, used to always say, if it was switching from a Wi-Fi connection to a 3G connection, it would always say, do you want to connect to the 3G connection? Interestingly, BlackBerry have shelved that for BlackBerry 10, which follows the central argument of Apple phones and good old Android phones is who gives a damn. They just check onto the most expensive data range you can get, and hopefully they can pay the bills at the end of it. It's not my problem, it's the carriers. But it is a very big concern for the carriers, certainly. So in terms of large consumer areas, so what we get is, for example, if we look at Glastonbury at the moment, the old painted cows have just been put up for this week. That's an EE special installation for Glastonbury itself. Got to remember that Glastonbury is 150,000 people all going into one area. And I haven't yet talked to the boys about what their capacity is at Glastonbury, but I'm not entirely sure they're going to be allowing 150,000 people uploading and streaming video live. It's not going to quite happen, but certainly you'll be able to charge your phone and send a little tweet back to your mates to say you're there. But it's a very big, real challenge of how do you get these unusual spikes delivered. People's expectation is, I've got my phone, I paid a lot of money for this iPhone or my HTC or whatever it might be, and I want it to work everywhere. And certainly the mobile guys, I think, have got a real headache there in terms of stepping up to some of these really big ones. So what do? Well, they obviously throttle and they start to sacrifice various things. So going back to Twickenham, you can still get your phone call, you can still get your data, but they'll throttle video. So it's a natural way of saying, how do we stop this spike from absolutely collapsing the whole network? And that's always going to be the case. The other one is obviously you think you're going to be uploading and streaming HD, but no, the guys at the other end are going to say, let's knock it back right the way back to a rather fuzzy little picture, so at least you get something rather than nothing. So a lot of these steps are beyond your control. And certainly sacrificial capacity management is something I believe we'll always have to live with. Obviously multicasting and various other methodologies are always there to be discussed, and we'll be certainly they're actively trying to push them there, and there's a lot of peering arrangements going on. Some people love and some people hate. But in essence, at the end of the day, if you throw many, many people in one environment, you're going to have capacity problems. It's as simple as that. Platform experiences. Let's have a look at a sort of typical one. Sports, probably one of the most challenging. A nice little head and shoulders shot, hardly changing. You can get away with really small bit rates. The vectoring is hardly changing. Your frame rate's refreshed hardly has to happen, and it's no problem. Sports, active sports, particularly against backdrop of grass. We do a lot of horse racing, and it's probably the most challenge you can get. Really, a lot of activity, massive screen refresh requires really good data being pumped quickly to these machines. And you've got to remember that a phone is not a very big computer, so these things are struggling sometimes. And when you get from the capacity point of view, if you look at it from the platform side, you get this sort of spike here, which suddenly transfers to the fact that there was a little football match going on. It just shows you how much they suddenly have to gear up in terms of this expectation that, oh, it's live, let's quickly log on now. The referral to, by the carriers are often, Matt from EE refers to the tsunami of video, and the way that they literally see this wall of video of requests coming to them. They're going, oh. And although they've built this huge LTE network, they can already see it being completely saturated. I mean, it's not long before, and okay, we can talk about 5G in 2020 or whatever it might be, but you know, for the here and now, we've got to, I keep banging on about the fact that there is a capacity issue. Really interestingly, from a platform level, we as as deliverers and reporting to the broadcaster or the advertiser, we do a lot of agencies, fascinating data you get from the use of when suddenly in the old days it used to be what's the power consumption when suddenly the break happens in the big cliffhanger and everyone puts their kettle on. You see a very similar trend here where you've got the half-time bit where suddenly you've got this video suddenly releases back and then bounces up again. So there's some really interesting stats there that I won't bother going in, but it's giving us a lot of information. You've got obviously the deliverable website stats, you've got the platform stats, and it makes compelling information about what people love and how they like to consume their media. Certainly in terms of formats, I suppose we divide ourselves into two environments, really. One of them when we have a static live environment. So we run studios and various fixed channel environments for clients, high-end clients, and we'll therefore have the luxury of having a full installed encoding farm, very high-end layer 2 connectivity or private connections with N+1 throughout the chain. So if the live broadcast is really, really important, then and they're making money out of it, I think that's probably one of the biggest things. I tend to like working with clients that make money out of it because it means they're quite attuned to it working nice and will at least try and pay us more than £1.50 for it. The idea is then you can use that fixed location to really pump as much of the encodes from the venue to your platform because you know where you're going. You've got the ability to ship in huge amounts of kit there, and you can do all the really heavy grunt work on the venue side. Again, this is my view, and there's lots of other people would say it the other way. On the other side, there are lots of one-off venues we appear to where, quite frankly, we're not going to take a 40-foot truck along, and the connectivity, again, in the local environment, if the client doesn't want to pay for DSAT uplink or 3-4G mobile, we're scrabbling around for uplink, so therefore we're only going to get one little stream back to the platform, and we're going to get the platform to do all the rest of the transcoding or transrating or encoding on the platform. So two different formats there. A lot of people don't like to have a big investment in encoders. We tend to have a lot of investment in encoders, and they're broadcast grade, and we monitor them the whole time, and we check their heartbeat and make sure that they're all tickety-boo and everything's fine if it's a 24/7 channel, and so we should. And there's the other end where people appear with a laptop and hope that it works, but unfortunately I tend not to like that idea. It's a bit dirty. I like to sleep at night. So going back to the encoding side, we've either got this very high-end kit that will munch any number of different formats that you need to create for the different devices, or you just get one format backhaul it to the platform, and then do all the different formats there. And obviously, what formats do we do? Well, much as MPEG-DASH, and I know in the last couple of days, probably for those of you who logged in, you've heard all the latest updates in terms of technology. Without sounding like an old sourpuss at all, I would say that, quite frankly, I was told that Flash should be dead by now, but for some reasons, people like the BBC and YouTube still use it. So, hey, we'll keep going with that. HLS clearly is a huge one for us in terms of coming back to our mobile delivery, obviously. And in fact, we're obviously looking to the future and how it goes, but it just doesn't change very much at the moment. It's pump out more of the same. People certainly aren't very choosy about what format you deliver it to them. They just want it to work. So our job is to say, right, let's cover the whole range and make sure that it all works. Certainly, MPEG transport stream and things like that, I think it's been going for a long time with forward error correction and goodness knows what, allows fantastic quality of service if you've got a really good, you know where your routings are, but the dreaded internet can often let you down. So I think the first thing here obviously is part of the going live is we tend to do a lot of pre-live planning. We need to know the expectations of the clients, the end users, what sort of quality are they going to be watching it? Is it a particular campaign? If it's an advert for a specific age group, then probably if we're working closely with an agency, they'll know the type of phone that we're going to have to cover. We'll know some of the challenges, and if there's greater interaction with the video and it's got to be a live and interactive video, we'll need how to plan it accordingly. So the whole sort of encoding and the delivery planning will be done well before we go live, providing we're given notice. There are occasions where agencies will ring us up and give us very little occasion. We just have to take the whole truck with all the bits in it and hope we've done our homework. So we're talking about raising the formats, obviously. The next thing really is optimizing the quality. We all really desperately want to make sure that the experience on a mobile phone is as good as it can be. And there's no reason why in the right environments that it can't be absolutely stunning. I mean, we've got fantastic quality productions going on at the moment, particularly with tablets, which are obviously, in our case, seem to be the biggest growth. And what we really start with, unfortunately, unless you start with really good quality, I can't overestimate this really, unless you've got good quality to start with, you're never ever going to go anywhere. And it's a pretty obvious thing to say, but let me put it in the context of, if you've got really good quality at the high end, you can reduce your stream quite considerably and still end up with a good product. If you're given rubbish, you've got to really stretch it hard, and it's going to really waste itself by the time it gets to some small little phone that's an old antiquated one in a bad connection. So get some really good content to start with, and at least you're then starting at broadcast production standard and working back. The encoding, absolutely. I mean, unless you've got really good, I mean, we love FMLE and all the free and Wirecast and the rest of it, but if you're really going top end, no real beating a decent encoding processor, and certainly you might be doing multiple streams. Well, good luck if you've got a home-built desktop or a little laptop, because you're going to run out of cores. What are the actual devices you're broadcasting to? Really important to get that in. At times I see repurposed broadcasts that are stretched or squashed or changed because effectively they weren't really nominated for the particular device you are seeking to push it to. And I think that's a shame. If you've got the option to make a quality bespoke stream for a particular screen size or a device, you should be able to do it. At least that then gives you a fair chance of getting good quality. The quality of backhaul is absolutely crucial. We really spend a lot of time planning and doing tests on what sort of 3-4G reception we'll get in the venue if it's a one-off event, what sort of conditions the network is like if it's in a venue like this. Can they actually quaz the network? My engineers would say, we don't want to go anywhere on a contended network, because otherwise someone can do a backup just halfway through your uplink or your broadcast, and they kill your stream through no fault of your own. So you really need to own either a bespoke little line that they might hand off if you're lucky enough, or can they actually on their firewall just shave 5 megs or 10 megs off their total connectivity and provide it to you exclusively. That would be great. But then obviously we get back to platform capacity. I think the days of the cloud suggest that everybody's now doesn't have to worry about capacity, but what about ITV and little World Cup recently? Oops. I mean, there are these problems whereby, for human error or whatever they might be, you can't guarantee to have the platform capacity there unless you've done a bit of pre-planning. You need to ring up and say, my engineers always refer to the idea that if you want to book the motorway, you want to make sure you know how many lanes you need, you know how many cars the maximum are going to be going down it. And you know what? If you don't use enough of them, then it's an empty road. But if you get it wrong and you've only got 2 lanes when you needed 4, you're going to end up with problems. So we're again trying to find out what the likelihood of this thing going viral might be, or have you actually got a set audience you're broadcasting to so you can pitch it to them. Then certainly in terms of the actual platform itself, who are you using? Do you know how they get their streams out to the end targets? One of the things that amazes me with peering arrangements is you have no concept of actually who's delivering the product to the end user. So if they're actually taking least cost routing, or they're pushing it out via the Ukraine and back again, and they happen to pull the plug at the time, you would have no idea of that until after the event. So I think it's sometimes just a tacit acknowledgement, but a little bit of understanding of how your actual streams will go from your platform to the end user is not a bad little acid test. Then we get down to, obviously, in terms of the optimizing at the end of it, we've done our good job of spitting it out of the platform. That's looking great. The question is, how's the person going to be connected to that stream? Clearly, there's an awful lot of hybrid flying between Wi-Fi and 3-4G the whole time, which is great. LANs, we know, or wireless generally, wired arrangements can differ enormously. We had a case where during the lunchtime break, one of the venues we used in London was literally being saturated. We couldn't get any uplink or downlink, and it was because the local exchange hadn't yet been upgraded, and everybody that was logged on watching YouTube at lunchtime was saturating the local exchange. So you have to be quite careful about this assumption that we're in a marvellous BT-backed society that will never run out of capacity because there's clearly problems there. Anyway, I'll skip over that one. In terms of connection, are you on the move? That's the one big question mark, isn't it? Are you on the move, or are there other people swanning in trying to camp onto the same connection that you're on? It's extraordinary how many people will always tell us that, no, we've got ample connectivity, we've got 100 megs and yours is only 5 meg stream. And you go, well, no, what else is going on in the network? And sure enough, they realise that actually they've been rerouted via a different proxy server or something. It might be going out to another area of their sub-office that's got a 2 meg connection or something ridiculous. So, quite difficult to know how people are connecting. There's some very good apps actually that you can do, and we use scanning when we go to a site to find out where all the Wi-Fi routers are and what their signal strengths are and various other things. So we can use a spectrum analyzer. You can do the same thing with 3-4G, and there are tools that you can use to find out what's available. What's more difficult is to get people to own up as to how saturated their networks are, because not many people like to publish the fact that they're 99.9 and stuttering. So it's always a little bit of suck it and see sometimes, but it's there are various tools we use to say what is the risk of us suddenly losing a live connection, because we have to brief our clients in terms of if it's a high risk, do they have a backup? Is there a backup for everything, redundancy for everything? And we create one of these things called a broadcast continuity document when we do a live production on the basis of saying, let's go through everything. What happens if someone runs in and starts protesting? Have you sorted that out? What happens if the fire alarm goes off? What happens if... And then you go down to the technical side of if the power goes, if you've got a generator, we take, to our really high-end ones, we'll take a generator with us. We'll literally be able to run everything. We've got backup encoders, so if someone spills coffee or kicks the encoder and it blows up on the way, we've got a switch over. We've actually balanced them. We've got redundant paths going, might be 3-4G and KA or DSAT, uplink, or whatever it might be. So we've got N+1 throughout the whole thing, so that we know that we can get it to the platform. And from the platform, of course, is A and B split. So if some parts of it fail, it's self-healing and the other half picks up. But the bit you can't do is what happens if your client is complaining and it's stuttering like mad, and we're looking at the master going out from the platform and it's as solid as hell. We know that it's not us, it's definitely them, and you have to identify where the break might be. So the other last thing about the quality really is, and again, it's quite a fascinating one, is really the power and the ability of these devices now to really push good video. Unfortunately, I haven't yet seen any of these fantastic devices with really, really good battery power. And as one of my clients asked to quote recently for a continuous 40-minute live stream on an iPhone, and I said, well, would you realise that you wouldn't get to the end of something like that because your battery would be flat? And how many people walk around with 3 interchangeable batteries or a plug on the whole time? So there are very real and present difficulties with devices like smartphones that, again, it's this expectation that it's going to work so brilliantly well, but actually the truth is that poor little thing's suffering quite a bit trying to munch all this lovely data you're throwing at it. But what we do know is the most recent devices can often have very good antenna on them. They can have much better processors inside them. And the older devices that we still have to push to, so some of the older iPhones, we even push to BlackBerries as well in the corporate environment. But some of them really struggle. So there's no telling for the fact that unfortunately we're not responsible for their device. And the last bit, obviously, keep on pushing that, is the carrier in terms of is there local contention in the carriers. So, I mean, again, we have to some extent. So a little bit of planning. You can sort of work out what time of the event's going to be, whether there's things you should take, any steps you should take to sort of safeguard. But in essence, that little checklist there are the sort of things that we will go through to determine whether we think there's going to be a major problem or not, and whether we need to tell people in advance that we're worried about it and what the backup plan would be. Clearly, the broadcast chain, effectively, we own or push out to all the different devices here, where you've got your capture here, you've got your central encoding processing, this is obviously HTTP, off to your CDN network, and then your delivery. So that's the whole chain we're talking about there, and as I was mentioning, that would be classically a static encoding and policy, whereas many people would take a lovely little laptop with them, and good luck to you. And then obviously the increasing amount of mobile that we are. I mean, I can't tell you, and I'm not allowed to tell you actually, that, you know, in terms of our stats of the consumption of media of tablets is, I just think over the last 3-4 years is staggering. It's just amazing. And you can see why it is the case, but it's wonderful to see it. We like it. Right, latency. A very small point on latency before I bore you to tears. We love latency in the sense of we love low latency. And latency, just to be clear, is what is the gap between the real event happening and you seeing it on your screen. So that's a non-techie good way of describing it. Why does it matter? It matters because some people make money out of getting content to them very quickly, or they derive a benefit from it. So, for example, a lot of our clients, some of our biggest clients are gambling clients. And gambling is obviously all about what the odds are at a certain snap point in time. So whilst Steve, bless him, delivered the iPhone with a classic 20-second buffering in it because he wanted really good quality video, and if there is a small clip in the way it's being delivered, it will skip over, recompile the video, and still deliver a really good-looking video for you. 20 seconds delay is a horrendously long time for someone that wants real-time information. And this is one of our biggest challenges, which I'll pinpoint later. So there are sectors who really do care about latency. Most people couldn't give a damn, but for those that do, it can mean a lot of money or a big advantage. And what do we do to make sure that the latency is reduced? Firstly, our platform is completely configured to be low latency. So any application we build on our platform, we control, we don't outsource, and we effectively configure it in a way that reduces the amount of, well, the guys play with it quite nicely, I should say. We don't suddenly throw it halfway around the world and back again. We obviously plot the route and the peering arrangements that we've got with our clients to make sure that we know we can hit particular geo audiences. In our case, it's mostly UK audiences for gambling, for example. And therefore, our peering arrangements with the key ISPs is very close. So there's not going to be any huge, great delay between when we're pushing it from our platform and when they actually connect to it over the net. We certainly, we make sure that streamers, as I say, are completely encoded, configured, I beg your pardon. And then obviously the transcoding side of it, we're not waiting to transcode multiple times. We're trying to do it immediately in a very high res and pump it straight through the platform and out. We don't want further processing on the platform edge. And then on the client side, what you can do, which is fascinating with the development of app technology, is you can actually alter the way the players work in various devices. So if you know you're connected to a really cracking Wi-Fi connectivity, because you'll know that from the client side, then you can very leverage that particular advantage. If you're obviously in an environment where you're only on 2G or 3G, you have the option to change the method or the quality of your video, because obviously low latency cuts out the principle of, okay, I'm in trouble, on the normal route is I'll just increase the buffering until you get a really good experience. No, we're saying don't increase the latency. So the only way you've got to go is to reduce the quality. So if you try and reduce the quality, then at least you're delivering on your promise to the guy saying, I'll get it to you ASAP, but one tacit understanding of this, and the agreement we'll have to have, is that it may not be your wonderful HD if you want it really quick. So at least there's most common sense people can understand that. And what we've ended up doing is building players which effectively are a plug-in to people's apps, which we just launched, which will effectively accelerate it. Anyway, it's the end of my plug, but if anybody's interested, I'll talk about it in depth. And just looking at the particular chain there of where latency can build in, it's all about, at the head end, obviously, back to my lovely great quality, what backhaul arrangements are you using, how quickly can it get back to the platform. Again, our core clients will have 100 meg connections or even more, and multiple of them in order for us to shoot every manner of encodes, backhaul encodes to the platform. Making sure that the platform is, you know who is actually doing the syndicated, the streaming, and it's not just sent to any old peering. And secondly, how they're routing, where their BGP routers are and all that sort of stuff. And on the client side, which carrier they're using, what device are they using, what's the capacity in that area, and is the connectivity any good? And I suppose, certainly, I mean, what we find is that if you've done your, again, going back to your planning, if you've really thought the way through with the particular audience, you roughly know where they're going to be. You can pretty well get good indication that you've done all the first half of it, then hopefully the rest of it will take care of itself, because you've effectively optimized it from the minute it leaves your platform and it's heading down the big motorway. Couple of case studies. I think I promised to do a case study or two on delivering to mobiles. Here's a corporate delivery we do. It's the training of accountancy lawyers and barristers in the UK, one of the biggest publishers we work for. And they've been pumping out desktop webinars for years, and we introduced a mobile version of it. And it's effectively, it's a cracking service, actually. It's a lovely service for people that are really quite too busy to be sat for the hour. We do 3 one-hour sessions a day, one at 9:30, one at 12:30, one at 3:30 for this client. And each different session will be to do with a sector of law or a sector of tax and accountancy. And they're heavily traditional broadcast mixture of expert panelists, 1, 2, often a moderator and 2 or 3 guests, and then deep, heavy slides on content that people that are having to listen and watch this in order to become qualified as a barrister or a lawyer or an accountant. So you have a captive audience, but it's fairly heavy stuff. And I can't say I know everything about shipping law, but obviously if I watch them every now and again, I learn more. But effectively, you've got to get the content across to these people, both live, on the move, and as clear and crisp as possible. So what we've ended up doing is providing the service for all the mobile phones, obviously make sure, heavy amount of BlackBerries. You'll probably not hear many people talk about streaming to BlackBerries that don't work in these sort of niches, because there's still a lot of BlackBerries around. They're approved, they're locked onto the corporate network, therefore they're a great mechanism to communicate with certain employees. Whereas if you look at the app world, I mean, I was at App World last week, funny enough, and BlackBerry were there flying a flag, but I mean, not many people were at the stand, because why would you develop an app for BlackBerries? I mean, it's just not, the audience is just too small. But for those that are still using it, and it's RTSP, it's very easy for us. It's great, low latency, and it's very reliable. But anyway, the content here, the challenges that we faced were, how do we get it through to the mobile devices, and we make sure we've cleared them for all, and then particularly, how do we purpose the content to make sure it's applicable for the device. One of the biggest problems, which is probably nicely shown by this rather squashed image here, is that on a big screen, when you're on your desk, you can see the lovely PowerPoint slides, and the font size that the girls and the boys that create them adhere to are absolutely brilliant for a large screen. You try compressing it down to a small thing and reading that table 6, subsection 4 of the latest act. So what we tend to do is we tend to go picture in picture with these sort of things, and therefore when it's not specific to a slide, we'll obviously focus on the speaker. It's quite an oral thing, so they can actually just listen to it rather than necessarily see it. And then when it refers to a particular case point, or if they're doing something that's specific within the text, then we blow out the actual slide to make sure that the listener can then at that time watch it properly, and if they're on the train or something, they can then think, oh, I see what you're doing. A lot of people wouldn't bother with that and they'd just do the slides, but I think we're just trying to make it a more rich environment, so that you're saying, who are the people, how are they absorbing it, how do we make it a bit more compelling and sticky? So the guys came up with a broadcast chain that worked pretty well. For this particular client, we started off with a mobile microsite. Again, everybody loves apps, don't they? But I can't help being a slight cynic that when you start with these things, you don't possibly know every way that someone's going to absorb the content. So if you have a rather more dynamic microsite environment, you can change it on the fly, and that's what we've effectively done. We've sort of tinkered with it till we've got to the point where it really works well, and then you can start pouring concrete with an app. But unless your client really wants to throw money at it from day one, which not all of our clients do, we tend to sort of go, let's do a bit of a trial period, and then gradually see what the feedback is, like any good interactive program, and carry on augmenting and refining the product and service until it becomes hopefully what you're really, really proud of. This particular one had its own challenges as well, in the sense that they are 1-hour programs. And everybody said, yeah, I want it VOD. You go, 1 hour saving on your iPhone? What are the rules when you want to save a 1-hour program onto your iPhone? Do I overwrite your family photographs, get rid of the kids and the cat shots because I need to make room on your phone? What happens if I've got 80% room? And all those lovely challenges that come into app building. So it's all quite fun and games. We enjoy that. Certainly the subscriber issues, obviously when you start going, these are paid for content. You can only see it if you pay for it. How do you interact with the DRM system? and all those stuff. So it all gets quite challenging. So that's a corporate environment. This one is more of a, this is our gambling clients. So I'll just quickly give you an idea of sort of the intricacies of how we can deliver these sort of things. William Hill is one of the biggest bookies in the UK. It is the biggest book in the UK, a dear client of ours. And one of the areas that's been moving very quickly recently is the in-play market. And that's when you're betting on an event whilst it's happening, as opposed to the traditional bookie market where you go to put your tenner on a horse and they shut the gates 5 minutes before and say, off you go. So this is the in-play market. It's incredibly important to have really quick, live, low latency, good quality data pushed to the client. Their growth in mobile, that figure of 166% growth in mobile shows you how much. They are a company, as are all the betting companies, spending huge amounts of money online and huge amounts of money on developing products for mobiles and tablets, and you can see why. And the biggest problem we had in 2013 was, going back to the point I made earlier, is the low latency on an iOS device. That was on an iPhone and an iPad. It's okay with a Mac with a flash plug-in, but the single non-flash playing iOS devices. And that's really where we came to then say to ourselves, we'd engineer a plug-in that overrides the native player in there so that we can get the video and the audio back to the actual viewer. And I was just watching the telly yesterday, as I do in my office. Obviously a very good documentary called Nadal versus Klinzen. And here we are, literally poised at the moment. And effectively, this is courtesy of the BBC, not another stream that I can't show you. But anyway, this is a public sector service. The BBC shows their service around about 8 to 10 seconds. No, it's about 10 to 14 seconds behind live, if you want to be pedantic about it. That's on DSAT. And effectively, you are now looking at your scoreboard, you're looking at the action, and you're an avid gambling client. You want to hit the in-play market. And for those of you who don't know what the in-play market represents, here we are, we've got what's the next game, the second set, game 8, what's the chances, what are the odds for? Here we are, is Martin Klinzen wins to love, or to 15 or to 30. So all the variables that could happen and that are going to happen in the next phase of the game, either in the next game or the following games, are obviously then given by the bookie a certain ranking here in terms of odds. And those will change, they'll be flexible the whole time. So it just shows you the complexity. This is all real-time data, this is changing the whole time. And it's all very well, and you've got all the stats here to try and help you decide what's going on. But it's all very well, but if you haven't got the audio that goes with it, then what are you making a decision on? You want as much media as possible if you're a really high-end gambler, or even if you're a low-end gambler like me and you want to just put a fiver every now and again. You need that data delivered really, really in real time. So that's the fun and games that we play with. And it's certainly not without its challenges, but it's great fun. So, summary then. Bored enough, I'll leave you to it. I think the key point that I would say to you in terms of mobile delivery, or delivering to mobiles, is really think about the end device. Don't just take someone else's feed and hope you can throw it to a mobile device. Do some planning about it. Please make it a quality experience. I mean, I see so much rubbish. It's just appalling, really horrible. And I think, the old adage, cheap's not cheap for nothing. If you're going to get it free and it is delivered cheap, and I love the boys, and we see them at Google and YouTube for their platforms. And of course, I'm biased because I have my own platform, but we do use their platform a lot. But when you've got things like an algorithm that shuts your live stream off because you don't think that you've got the rights for it halfway through an event, it's quite embarrassing. But anyway, so careful who you use in terms of distribution, how much backup they've got, what sort of redundancy. Certainly, I can't believe why you're here listening to me now, so I'm sure you're all pretty interested by where the mobile field is going, but it's certainly not going down. And then there's a classic bit that some of the old broadcast boys used to say, that if you look at the difference between the cinema experience, the TV experience, the PC experience, and the mobile experience, it's almost like a sort of a halving or a quarter. You could be 3 hours in a cinema and you'd have a fantastic experience. You could be 30 minutes on a PC, but you might only be 3 minutes or 3 seconds on a mobile. And some of the mobile stuff is really, really short, viral, tickly, fun things that are working, not hours and hours and hours of stuff that's not going to work unless you've got a captive audience. So all I would say is for mobile is just keep them really keep their appetite going and keep it short and sweet, and they'll come back for more. Don't try and blast them. You've got battery problems, you've got connectivity problems, you've got all sorts of things where you can turn them off pretty quickly. So that, I think, is the end of it. Any questions at all? If you want, I'll be floating around outside, so if anybody's got any questions too.
You're not using the native video player in the iPhone. Doesn't that further affect the battery life?
No.
No?
No. 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 We just bypass it.
Are you using HLS on iPhone?
No. By definition, we wouldn't. Yeah, we would go RTSP basically. That's why we have to put our own player in.
And Apple allows to do this?
If you know how to build your players correctly. Yeah. Quite a lot of testing. Yeah. There are a few gimmicks, but yeah, definitely it works very solidly, so you can do it. But I mean, as I say, H.264 and HLS is all brilliant, but it is not designed for low latency, and I think that's why we hit a brick wall. Okay.